Hello friends, welcome to the second day of our video lecture series. Today we are going to discuss the second part of our discussion on percentages. So we'll take up some more questions. We'll take up 10 questions of different types today. Since percentage happens to be a vast topics, we probably will be able to cover all the type of questions in these two particular videos. So let us get started with the questions of day 2 and percentage part 2. Now the first question. In an examination, it is required to get 30% of minimum marks to pass. A student got 110 marks and was declared failed by 10 marks difference. That means, then what was the total marks? Now, if you look at this particular question, it says that after scoring 110, the student failed by 10 marks. Means if he had scored 120 marks, he would have passed. And this 120 happens to be the 30% of the total 30% of minimum marks to pass. 30% minimum marks to pass. So this 30% happen. This 120 happens to be the 30% of the total mark. So if the total marks is x, that means x ka 30% is equal to 120. Now how much is 30%? X ka 3 by 10 is equal to 120, or x is equal to 400. So the total marks is 400. Hence the correct option to this question is option number A. This is a relatively easy question. Let us move on to the next question. Now this question is again of a different type, which is frequently asked in the exams. It requires a little bit of concept from set theory. I'll be explaining it to you. Let us first read the question. It says, in a class, 60% students passed in Telugu, 50% students passed in English. Then if every student passed in either Telugu or English or both subjects, then what is the percentage of students passed in both the subjects? Now it says that students who passed in number who passed in Telugu is equal to 60%, and percentage who passed in English is 50%. Now that means, and it says then if every student passed in either Telugu or English, every student of the class passed in either Telugu or English or both. None of the students has failed in all the subjects. This is given in the question. Now we have to figure out then what is the percentage of students passed in both the subjects. Now people who have passed in both the subjects is represented as number T both the subjects is T intersection E. So suppose if this is number who passed in Telugu and this is the number who passed in English and this is the number who passed in both Telugu and English. Now this common area is defined as T intersection E, whereas all other areas are defined as this particular area is defined as T union E. T union E means people who passed in either Telugu or English or both, whereas T intersection E means people who passed in both Telugu and English. Now, the formula for this says NT intersection E is equal to N T plus N E minus, sorry, this formula is, the formula is N T plus N E minus N T union E. So now you can see NT is given as 60%, NE is given as 50%, and people who passed in, the question says if every student passed in Telugu or English or both. So that means every student, the total number of students, it represents the total number of students in the class, which is 100%. So minus 100%. So that is equal to 110% minus 100%, which is equal to 10%. So 10% is the correct answer. So the correct answer to this question is option number A. Now coming to the third question. It says in a class 60% of the students passed in Telugu, 50% of the students passed in English, and 20% of the students passed in both the subjects. Then what is this percentage of the students who failed in both the subjects? So if you see here, total who passed in Telugu is given as 60%, and those who passed in English is given as 50%, and those who passed in both Telugu and English, those who passed in both Telugu and English is given as 20%. So therefore, people who passed in Telugu as well as English and both, people who passed in either Telugu or English or both, is equal to people who passed in Telugu plus people who passed in English minus people who passed in Telugu as well as English. So this is equal to, it is given as 60% plus 50% minus 20%, which is equal to 110% minus 20%, which is equal to 90%. That means 90% of the persons passed in either Telugu or English or both. So what about the remaining 10%? The remaining 10% couldn't pass in any of the subjects. Okay? So आपका क्वेश्चन क्या पूछ रहा है? What is the percentage of the students who failed in both the subjects? So those who failed in both the subjects is 10%. So the correct answer to this question is option number B. Now moving to the next question. This question says a mixture of 30 liters of milk and water contains 30% water. It contains 30% water. The new mixture is formed by adding 10 liters of water. What is the percentage of water in the new mixture? Okay. So it says there is 30 liters of water, out of which 30% is water. 30% is 30% is 9 liters is water, and the remaining 21 liters is milk. So 9 liters is water and 21 liters is milk. It says the new mixture is formed by adding 10 liters of water. So if you add water, 10 liters of water, so the quantity of water in the mixture will become 19 liters, and that of the milk will remain as 21 liters. So what is the percentage of water in the new mixture? So the percentage of water in the new mixture is, the new mixture has become 40 liters. The mixture, when you add 10 liters of water, then it becomes 40 liters. So the new mixture is 40 liters, and the percentage of water in the new mixture is 19 divided by 40 into 100. So it becomes how much? It becomes 2 to the 4, 2 5 the 10, 95 by 2%, which is equal to how much? 2 4 the 8, 2 7 the 14, 1 and 1 by 2. 47 1 by 2%. So the correct answer to this question is option number D. D is the correct answer. Moving on to the next question. It says, from the salary of Roja, 20% is deducted as house rent. Okay, you have deducted 20% as house rent. Deducted 20% as the house rent. 10% she spends on children's education. 10% on education. This is house rent. This is education. And 20% on watching movies. And movies she spends 20%. If her savings are, so how much she has already spent? She has spent 20% plus 10% is 30% plus 20 is 50%. So she has already spent 50%. So she is left with 50%. Now her savings are 5760. If her savings are 5760, then and if her total income was X, X ka 50% is, which is remaining with her, that is equal to 5760, or X into 1 by 2 is 5760. Therefore, X is equal to 5760 into 2, which is how much? 6 to the 12, 1, 11520. So the correct answer to this question is option number C. Now moving to the next question. From the salary of Roja, 20% is deducted as house rent, 10% of the rest she spends on children's education. Now you need to notice this word rest. It is different from the previous question. In the previous question it said, that from the salary of Roja, 20% is deducted as house rent, 10% she spends on children's education. Now this 10% is of her original income, but in the next question you can see that from the salary of Roja, 20% is deducted as house rent and 10% of the rest she spends on children's education. So 10% of the rest is she spends on children's education, and 20% of the balance she spends on watching movies. If her savings are 5760, then her total salary is how much? So let her total salary be X. Now she has spent 20% is deducted as house rent. So 20%, so remaining is 80%. So X ka 80% is there with her. 80% is 4 by 5. 80% is how much? 80% is equal to 4 by 5 in fraction form. Now this is the salary she is left with after paying house rent. Now 10% of the rest, now this is the rest amount. 10% of the rest she spends on children's education. That means she'll be left with 90% of the rest. 90% of the rest is 9 by 10. Now, this is the salary. This is the salary after paying house rent and children's education, paying for children's education. And 20% of the balance she spends on watching movies. And balance 20% if she spends on watching movies, that means 80% is with her. So, iska 80% is iska 4 by 5. And she is left with, her savings are 5760. That means this must be equal to 5760, or x is equal to 5760 into 250 divided by 4 into 9 into 4. So 16 into 9. Now if you solve this, this will become 16 3s are 48, 9, 16 6 is 96, so it becomes 360, and 9 4 is 36, so it becomes 40, and the chok is, so this becomes 25 4 is 100. Double yani her salary was 10,000 rupees. So 10,000 is the correct answer. Moving on to the next question. This question says fresh fruit contains 68% water and dry fruit contains 20% water. 68% in fresh fruit, and in dry fruit it becomes 20% water. How much dry fruit can be obtained from 100 kg of fresh fruit? Okay, so you have 100 kg of fresh fruit, 100 kg fresh fruit. Now that means 68% is water. That means water in the dry fruit, in the fresh fruit is 68 kg. And what is the remaining? It is fruit solid or pulp. So pulp is how much? 32 kgs. 32 kgs. Now, how much dry fruit can be obtained from 100 kg of fresh fruit? Now, if you dry the fresh fruit, then the water content will evaporate, which will eventually leave the water content will evaporate, but the pulp content will remain intact. Now it says in the dry fruit 80% is pulp because 20% is water. If in dry fruit there is 20% water, then in dry fruit 80% is pulp. Now dry fruit ka 80% is 4 by 5 is equal to the pulp content, which is 32 kg, that is 32 kg, or dry fruit is equal to 40 kgs. So here you have to be cautious in deciding that the while drying the fresh fruit, the solid part will not evaporate, it will remain intact. And since just if you take the example of grapes, if you dry the grapes, it will become raisins. So the raisins, so the question says that grapes have 68% water, while raisins have 20% water. But if you dry grapes, the fruit solid, that is the pulp, will remain intact in the grapes itself, which will eventually become raisins. So the dry fruit will be dry fruit ka 80%, because 20% is water, that means 80%, or 4 by 5 is equal to 32 kgs, and therefore simplifying, the value of dry fruit comes out to be 40 kgs. So 40 kgs is the correct answer, and hence the correct option to this question is option number C. Now question number 8. It says if 20% of A is equal to B, then B% of 20 is same as, okay. Now the question says 20% of A is equal to B, or 20% we can write as 1 by 5 is equal to B. Then B% of 20. B% of 20 means B% of 20 means B by 100 into 20, or equal to B by 5. So if B is equal to A by 5, then B by 5 is equal to A by 5 divided by 5, or rather A by 25. Now 1 by 25 we can write it as 1 by 25 into A. Now 1 by 25 is how much? It is 4%. So we can say that it is 4% of A. So if 20% of A is B, then B% of 20 is equal to 4% of A. Correct option is option number. Now moving to the next question. This question says the value of machine depreciates at the rate of 10% every year. It was purchased 3 years ago. If its present value is rupees 8748, its purchase price was, now we have to calculate this. The value of machine depreciates at the rate of 10% every year. Depreciation of 10% every year means that the value decreases 10% every year. That means if minus 1 by 10, or if the value was 10, then it became 9 after 1 year. Similarly, in the second year, if the value was 10, it became 9. In the third year, if the value was 10, it became 9. So subsequently, if the value was 1000 3 years ago, it became 9 into 9 into 9, or rather 729. Or rather 729. 3 years after 3 years, it becomes, the value of 1000 becomes 729. Now it says if its present value is rupees 8748. Now this 729 represents 8748. So if you divide 8748 by 729, divide by 729, you will get how much? 12 times. Now that means 729 represents 8748, so 1 will represent 12. So 1000 will represent 12,000. So the value of the machine after 2 years was 3 years ago was 12,000 rupees. 12,000 is the correct answer. Now the final question. This question says 405 sweets were distributed equally among children in such a way that the number of sweets received by each child is 20% of the total number of children. How many sweets did each child receive? Now that means we do not know the number of children. So if the number of children is X, the number of sweets received by each child is 20% of the number of children. So each child received X by 20%. 20% is 1 by 5. So each child received X by 5 sweets. So if each child receives X by 5 sweets, then X children will receive X into X by 5 sweets. And the number of total sweets is 405. That means x square is equal to x square is equal to 405 into 5. Or rather 2025. Therefore x is equal to 2025 square, or the value will become how much? X into x by 5 is 405 sweets. How many sweets did each child receive? So now this is equal to 225. This will give us 225 is, let's take the square root of this. The square root is which is 425. Let's cancel out. So the square root of this is 45. So how many sweets will each child receive? He'll receive x by 5, and 45 by 5, that is equal to 9. So every child will receive 9 sweets. Now this was all regarding the different type of questions of percentages. I hope that I have covered most of the variety of questions that may come from this particular topic, that is percentages in the exam. If you have any queries regarding this particular topic, you can put your comments in the comment box, and we'll try to reply to your question or query as soon as possible. Thank you for watching this video.